Welcome to the Immigrantinlaw channel. If you are planning to move to Europe, it is not enough to look only at the rental price. Very often, the main mistake occurs after moving in, when it turns out that the housing seems affordable, but the utility bills are not. In one country, you may pay a reasonable amount for an apartment, but then spend hundreds of euros every month on heating, electricity, water, and building maintenance. In another country, it's the opposite. The rent seems higher, but the monthly utility costs are much lower. That is why today we will look at where in Europe utility bills are really expensive and where they are almost free compared to other countries. And most importantly, how to assess this before moving, so that you don't encounter any unpleasant surprises later. When people say utilities, it seems that everyone understands the same thing. But in practice, in different countries, this payment may include different expenses. Usually, it refers to electricity, heating, water, cooling, garbage collection, and sometimes building maintenance. The total amount depends not only on the country, but also on the size of the apartment, the season, the region, the quality of insulation, and the type of heating. Therefore, comparing countries on the basis of it's cheap there but expensive there is too simplistic. You need to look at the actual cost model. If we look specifically at European Union countries, Germany, Austria, Belgium, Denmark, and a number of other countries where the high cost of electricity and heating is particularly noticeable during the cold season, are most often highlighted among the destinations with the highest utility costs. Why is this happening? First, the high price of electricity plays a major role. Even with moderate consumption, the final monthly bill can be quite substantial. Second, the total cost of energy resources is important. When the costs of heating, hot water, and housing maintenance remain high, utility bills become a serious item in the budget. Thirdly, a lot depends on the house itself. If the house is old, poorly insulated, or heated in a less than optimal way, the amount on the bill can increase significantly. This is why the situation often looks like this. You move to an economically strong EU country with good infrastructure, a high level of service, and clear rules of life, but at the same time you face a significant monthly burden due to utility costs. This is especially acute in winter. If the apartment loses heat and the heating works intensively, the costs may be significantly higher than you expected in your initial calculations. Therefore, when choosing a country to move to, it is important to look not only at the rent or purchase price of the property, but also at how much it will cost to maintain it each month. It is at this stage that many people realize that the real cost of living in the country is higher than it seemed at first. When choosing a country, many people look at salaries, rent, taxes, and safety levels. And this is absolutely correct because these factors are usually the first to influence the decision to move. But utility costs are very often underestimated. People remember about them after they move in, when the first bills start coming in, and it becomes clear that the real cost of living is higher than expected. The problem is that utilities are not a one-time expense. It is a payment that is repeated every month. And if you miscalculate, it starts to affect your entire budget, your savings, everyday comfort, quality of housing, and even your decision to stay in this country at all. At first, the difference between the two countries may not seem very big. On paper, it seems like only a few dozen or a couple hundred euros per month. But in reality, over the course of a year, this difference turns into a significant amount that directly affects the financial stability of a family. That is why it is important to evaluate utility costs not as a minor detail, but as a permanent part of your future life in a new country. Now for the flip side of the coin. Where in the European Union are utility bills much lower? It is important to clarify right away. Almost free does not mean literally free. We are talking about countries where utility costs are significantly lower than in the most expensive destinations within the EU. Hungary, Bulgaria, and some countries in Central and Southeastern Europe are most often mentioned in such discussions. Compared to the more expensive countries in the western and northern parts of the European Union, their utility costs can indeed be perceived as much more reasonable and do not place such a heavy burden on the monthly budget. This difference is especially noticeable when it comes to small modern homes with good energy efficiency. In such cases, monthly payments are quite predictable and much easier to cope with in everyday life. But here too, it is important not to oversimplify. Even in a country with more affordable utilities, the final amount still depends on the size of the home, the season, the type of heating, and the condition of the house itself. In other words, low rates alone do not guarantee low bills if, for example, the apartment does not retain heat well. Nevertheless, in general, it is precisely these countries that are more often considered to be more comfortable in terms of utility costs. And for many families, this becomes an important argument when choosing a country to move to, because it allows them to reduce the constant burden on their budget in advance. But there is a very important point here. Low utilities alone do not make a country the best option for relocation. You always need to consider the whole picture, not only utility bills, but also rent, income level, taxes, transportation, healthcare, education, daily expenses, and overall quality of life. For example, in one country, you may pay less for electricity, heating, and water, but you may also face lower incomes, a limited job market, or fewer opportunities for professional growth. In another country, utilities may be more expensive, but the overall balance of life will be much more favorable for you thanks to higher salaries, a stable economy, developed infrastructure, and more opportunities. In addition, it is important to consider not only the numbers, but also your personal lifestyle. For one person, the decisive factor will be the minimum monthly budget, while for another, it will be the opportunity to earn more, adapt faster, and feel more confident in the long term. That is why, when choosing a country, it is important to look not for the cheapest one, but for the one that best suits your budget, your lifestyle, and your relocation goals. One of the most common mistakes is to rely solely on the stories of acquaintances. At first glance, this seems logical. Someone already lives in the country, shares their personal experience, quotes amounts, and describes their expenses. But the problem is that such examples are almost always too individual. One person may live in a new apartment with good insulation, while another may live in an old house with high heat loss. One may rent a 40 square meter apartment, while another may rent a 90 square meter apartment. For one, part of the expenses is already included in the monthly payment, while for another, everything is paid separately. In addition, even lifestyle matters. Some people are rarely at home, use electricity sparingly, and hardly ever use heating, while others work from home, cook more often, use more appliances, and accordingly, receive a completely different bill. Therefore, in words, both stories may sound the same. Utilities are expensive in this country, or everything is very cheap there. But in reality, these can be completely different situations. And if you rely only on someone else's experience without clarifying the details, it is very easy to draw the wrong conclusion about the real cost of living in the country. That is why it is important to evaluate utility costs not based on individual stories, but on the specific conditions of the housing and your own lifestyle. To accurately estimate future expenses, you need to check a few important things in advance, and it's better to do this before you move, rather than after you've already signed the lease and received your first bills. The first is the type of heating. This largely determines how high your utility bills will be during the cold season. The second is how energy efficient the house itself is. Even a neat-looking home does not always mean reasonable expenses if the building does not retain heat well. The third is how much tenants pay in winter, not just in summer. This is because utility bills almost always seem lower during the warm season, and the real burden becomes apparent when the heating season begins. Fourth, what exactly is included in the monthly bill? In one case, part of the expenses is already included in the total amount. In another, water, heating, building maintenance, or garbage collection are paid for separately. Without this detail, it is easy to make a mistake in your calculations. And fifth, how much do costs differ in different cities within the same country? Because sometimes the difference between the capital and a small town is so noticeable that it completely changes your monthly budget and overall perception of the cost of living. The more accurately you check these details in advance, the less risk you will face unexpected expenses after moving. The right question is not, where in the European Union are utilities the cheapest? The right question is, where will you find the optimal balance between utility costs, rent, income, and quality of life? This is the main idea, because a successful move is not about finding the cheapest country on the map, but choosing a place that really suits you in all key parameters. It is not only important how much you will pay for housing and utilities, but also how confident you will feel in your everyday life. Will you be able to plan your budget with peace of mind, maintain your usual level of comfort, and not worry every month about mandatory expenses? Because a successful move is not just about choosing a beautiful country, good infrastructure, or attractive prospects. It is choosing a place where you will be comfortable living every day, without constant stress over bills, and without feeling that your actual expenses are higher than expected. That is why you should focus not on abstract cheapness, but on the option that will give you stability, comfort, and a clear financial picture in the long term. To sum up, utility bills in the European Union can vary significantly, and it is this difference that often affects the real cost of living more than it seems at first. In some countries, monthly housing costs are a serious burden on the budget, especially during the cold season. In others, utility bills are much lower and allow you to feel more financially secure. But the main conclusion is that it is not enough to focus only on low or high bills. When choosing a country to move to, it is important to look at the big picture. Consider rent, income, taxes, housing quality, lifestyle, and your personal goals. Because the right decision is not just to move to a country where utilities are cheaper, it is to move to a place where you will find a comfortable and sustainable balance between expenses, opportunities, and quality of life. This approach helps you avoid unnecessary expectations, calculate your budget more accurately, and understand in advance how suitable the chosen country is for you in the long term. If you are considering moving to one of the European Union countries, leave a request for a free consultation with Immigrantinlaw lawyers. We will select the optimal relocation strategy for you, prepare all the necessary documents, explain the nuances of the legislation in detail, and answer all your questions. We will analyze your case, your goals, and your situation without templates. Want to learn more or start the process today? Contact us. All contact details are listed in the description below this video. We are here to help you take a confident step towards a new life. Like, subscribe to the channel, and ask your questions in the comments. I will be happy to answer them. Discover a world of opportunities with Immigrantinlaw.